Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain, and let's get into our episode.
Intelligentsia, the endem of sarcasm, the nutty professor, to your whack-ass marmalade. It's T-Bone from T-Bone and Chick Brew in the Morning. Now available in podcast format. Simply search for the T-Bone and Chick Brew podcast, available wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain. Independent media that won't reinforce tribalism. We have one planet, and nobody is leaving, so let us reason together. Politicians choosing voters, America's quiet democratic crisis. This is a Substack article I wrote today. Politicians choosing voters, America's quiet democratic crisis. When politicians begin choosing their voters instead of voters choosing their politicians, democracy slowly starts to feel less like representation and more like a strategy. There are many ways a republic can begin to lose itself. Most people imagine the collapse of democratic trust as something loud and dramatic. Tanks in the streets, men shooting through windows, men shouting through megaphones, a constitution suspended in a moment of chaos while the public watches history unravel in real time. But democracies rarely die that way. Most of the time they erode quietly. They erode through paperwork, through court decisions, through legal loopholes, through carefully designed systems that become increasingly disconnected from the people they're supposed to serve. And sometimes they erode through maps. That may sound dramatic to some people. After all, how dangerous can district lines really be? Quite dangerous, actually, because hidden in those lines is one of the biggest problems in modern American democracy. Politicians increasingly choosing their voters instead of voters choosing their politicians. Now, I'm sitting in the Commonwealth of Virginia currently. And Virginia's current redistricting fight is not simply about the Commonwealth of Virginia. It is a window into a much larger American sickness, a sickness neither political party wants to fully cure because, if we're honest, both parties have learned how to benefit from it. And that is precisely the problem. The lie we keep telling ourselves is this: Americans have become experts at moral inconsistency. When our political tribe benefits, we suddenly become constitutional scholars. When our political tribe loses, we become revolutionaries who have to toss out the Constitution. We may have to go to the Second Amendment remedies. Republicans often condemn gerrymandering when Democrats redraw favorable districts. Democrats often condemn gerrymandering when Republicans do the same thing. Yet somehow, when power changes hands, principles mysteriously become flexible. Maps that once looked corrupt suddenly become necessary. Manipulation becomes strategy. Power grabs becomes defending democracy. Everybody suddenly discovers a noble reason why their side deserves an exemption. Let us stop pretending. This is not merely a Republican problem, and this is not merely a Democratic problem. This is a human problem. Power protects itself, always has, always will. And when human beings gain the ability to shape political outcomes before citizens even vote, many will eventually justify doing exactly that. Now, that is not me being a cynic. That's not my cynicism. That's history. When politicians begin choosing their voters instead of voters choosing politicians, democracy becomes performance art. Virginia is not the exception. It's the warning. The current redistricting fight in Virginia has become another chapter in an increasingly familiar national story. Every side claims to be protecting democracy. Every side claims to be fighting for fairness. Every side insists that the other side is uniquely dangerous. But beneath the moral speeches sit an uncomfortable truth. Both parties increasingly fear losing power more than they fear weakening public trust in the system. And that fear is reshaping American politics. Texas redrew maps. California considers responses. Illinois protects incumbents. North Carolina redraws. Maryland pushes boundaries. New York fights over line. Virginia becomes another battlefield. Soon, everyone justifies escalation because the other side did it first. And that logic left unchecked becomes politically, mutually assured destruction. One side redraws maps, the other side retaliates. Then the retaliation becomes precedent. Then precedent becomes normal. And eventually citizens stop believing elections are fully competitive at all. The result is not merely frustration, the result is distrust. And distrust is poison in a republic because democracies are not held together by laws alone. They are held together by legitimacy. People must believe, even when they lose, that the system was fundamentally fair. Once citizens begin to suspect the game was arranged before they even stepped out onto the field, something dangerous begins to happen inside of the culture. Faith dies. Not faith in God, faith in institutions, faith in representation, faith that ordinary voices still matter. And once civic faith collapses, rebuilding it becomes incredibly difficult. Now, how the republic actually rots is important. We have romanticized political collapse. Hollywood taught us to expect fireworks, but history tells a quieter story. The Roman Republic did not disappear overnight. It weakened slowly. Institutions became tools of factional warfare. Political actors increasingly justified extraordinary behavior because extraordinary circumstances supposedly demanded it. Norms weakened, trust declined, rules bent, citizens became cynical. Every side convinced themselves that they were merely protecting the republic, even as their behavior slowly hollowed it out. Sound familiar? No, America is not wrong. History never repeats itself perfectly, but human beings repeat themselves constantly, and power behaves predictably. A republic rarely collapses because one villain suddenly appears. It decays because enough people begin believing fairness only matters when their side loses. This is how republics rot. Not all at once, not with taking the street, but with lawyers, maps, judges, loopholes, politicians pretending the rules only matter when their team breaks them. The republic of safe districts is what we are trying to become. And here's the practical problem most ordinary Americans rarely think about. Safe districts quietly poison representation. When politicians know their district is almost impossible to lose, something changes. Their incentives shift. And instead of fearing voters, they begin fearing primaries, and that distinction matters. A competitive politician must persuade a broad coalition of people. A protected politician only has to satisfy the loudest, most ideologically rigid voice inside of their own party. Compromise becomes dangerous. Moderation becomes weakness. Listening becomes optional. And suddenly representatives become performers for their base instead of servants for the public. This helps explains why American politics are increasingly feel like.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Has anybody ever told you you were over opinionated?
How about this one? You can talk about everything you like, but don't talk about religion. Don't talk about faith. Don't talk about politics. My name is Jerome McClain, host of Jerome McClain Show, and I want to introduce you to a show called Over Opinionated with my friend from Southwest Virginia, Josh Scott. Josh has always been told he has been over opinionated. He always tried to hold back these opinions, but he tried to back them up when he had to say something with facts and logic. Since he's grown up in many ways, he had to change a lot of his views and his opinions, as a lot of people should. He's not a millionaire from Fox News or CNN. He's just a hard-working, blue-collar type of guy. Give Josh Scott a shot at Over Opinionated with Josh Scott. You can find him on patreon.com/overopinionated at 679. You can also check him out on Twitter at NRV_guy79. Over Opinionated with Josh Scott, where he is this soft-spoken guy telling you the truth.
We talk about a lot of serious topics on this show. One very serious topic is women's health. One company that stood out to me was vslay.com because the owner is very transparent about her own struggles in the women's health department and has great customer service, great deals, and frequent sales. You can check her out, her great customer service, products about women's health, and frequent sales at www.vslay.com. That is www.vslay.com.
Permanent outrage. The incentive structure rewards outrage. Calm rarely goes viral. Nuance rarely wins primaries. Compromise rarely raises campaign money. Extremes are rewarded because safe districts reward extremists. And then citizens wonder why Congress behaves like cable television, because in many ways, that is exactly what it has become: a performance, a theater of outrage, an endless stream of people auditioning for ideological approval. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans trying to pay rent, raise children, survive inflation, and make sense of the world watch leaders scream at each other while accomplishing remarkably little. People can handle losing. Here is the uncomfortable truth many politicians refuse to acknowledge. Americans can actually tolerate disagreement. Americans can tolerate losing elections. What people struggle to tolerate is believing the game was rigged before the first vote was cast. There is a psychological difference there. Losing fairly hurts. Losing unfairly breeds resentment, and resentment eventually becomes radicalization. If enough citizens begin believing representation is manipulated before voting even starts, cynicism becomes inevitable. Why participate? Why vote? Why trust institutions? Why believe your voice matters? And when enough people stop believing they matter, democracies become fragile. A nation can survive disagreement. It struggles to survive widespread hopelessness. People can endure political defeat. What they struggle to endure is the belief that the outcome was engineered before the voting even began. The problem is bigger than the maps. Gerrymandering is not the disease. It's the symptom. The deeper crisis is tribalism. America has become so politically tribal that many people no longer evaluate fairness consistently. Fairness has become conditional. Rules matter until your side benefits. Principles matter until power is threatened. Suddenly, cheating feels justified because the other side cheated first. But retaliation rarely restores trust. It accelerates collapse. And somewhere along the way, Americans begin accepting a dangerous idea that democracy only matters when we win. That is not democracy. That is a fandom. And a nation cannot survive if it becomes nothing more than rival tribes trying to outmaneuver one another while pretending moral consistency still exists. So, what do we do? Criticisms without solution is also at times just a performance. So let us talk solutions now. No system will ever be perfect. Why? Because human beings are involved, and human beings ruin perfect systems all the time. But there are better ways. Independent redistricting commissions deserve serious national consideration. Clear transparency standards matter. Competitive districts should be encouraged whenever possible. Courts should apply standards consistently, regardless of party. And perhaps most importantly, Americans themselves must rediscover principles, not tribal principles, real first order principles. The kind that says, if I would call this corruption when the other side does it, I should probably call it corruption when my side does it too. Now that sounds simple, but it's not, because honesty becomes difficult when power is involved. The quiet democratic crisis, maybe the greatest threat to democracy, is not a dramatic authoritarianism. Maybe it's something a lot quieter, something a lot slower, something easier to justify, something polite, something legal, something dressed in expensive suits while speaking the language of democracy. Because the death of civic trust does not always arrive by announcing itself. Sometimes it arrives smiling. Sometimes it arrives through technicalities. Sometimes it arrives disguised as strategy. And sometimes it arrives through district maps. If politicians increasingly choose voters instead of voters choosing politicians, representation eventually becomes something else entirely. A managed outcome, a controlled environment, a democracy that still exists on paper, but feels increasingly distant in practice. And that should concern conservatives, and that should concern liberals, and that should concern independents, because eventually every political weapon gets turned around. The rules we normalize today becomes the rules we use against us tomorrow. And then by then, the damage is already done. America does not need fair maps only when one political side benefits. America needs fair maps because voters deserve real representation. And if that sounds radical now, perhaps that tells us something uncomfortable about how far we have already drifted. Because republics do not usually disappear in a moment. They disappear inch by inch, boundary by boundary, excuse by excuse, until citizens wake up one morning and realize trust quietly left the room. That is an article that it is on Substack. To share, like, subscribe as many as you can. It is called Politicians Choosing Voters, America's Quiet Democratic Crisis. Subtitle: Politicians Choosing Voters, America's Quiet Democratic Crisis. Of course, I like to say, when it comes to these political times, I am the author of Faith and the Ballot. I am a counselor, cultural critic, pastor, author of Faith and the Ballot, A Christian's Guide to Voting, Unity, and Witness in Divided Times. And in an age of outrage and tribalism, I try to make sure my work seeks clarity, moral consistency, and a politics rooted in truth than in team loyalty. Right back with more on the Darrell McClain Show. Now, after the first segment, I want to bring the temperature down a little bit, because sometimes when we talk about democracy, politics, power, corruption, gerrymandering, redistricting, safe seats, parties manipulating maps, politicians choosing voters instead of voters choosing politicians, it can all start to feel very heavy, and not just intellectually heavy, heavy spiritually and heavy emotionally. Heavy in the place where people start asking deep, what is the point? And I don't want to leave people in that deep despair, because cynicism is easy. Faith, optimism, hope is harder. Cynicism lets you sit back and say, everybody is corrupt, everything is rigged, nothing matters, nobody listens, the powerful always win. And sometimes, if we are honest, cynicism hits us deeply because it sounds intelligent. Cynicism sounds mature, it sounds like wisdom. But cynicism is not always wisdom. Sometimes cynicism is just wounded hope wearing a clever disguise. Sometimes cynicism is what happens when people have been disappointed so many times that they'd rather expect nothing than risk in believing anything at all again. And I got to admit, I understand that. I really do. But I also believe this: history is not just the story of powerful people doing whatever they want. History is also the story of ordinary people telling powerful people, no, you got this one wrong. That is the part that we forget. We remember kings, we remember presidents, we remember governors, we remember judges, we remember generals, and we remember billionaires. But history is also full of farmers, mothers, coal miners, teachers, students, janitors, preachers, barbers, factory workers, church ladies, veterans, immigrants, formerly incarcerated people, and regularly everyday citizens who looked at the government and said, you are not listening to us, you are not representing us, you are not protecting us, you are not speaking for us, and if you will not fix this, then we are going to make you fix it. And that's the beautiful thing. That is the best of this republic. That is the best of a democracy. Not democracy as a slogan, not democracy as a campaign ad, not democracy as some politicians say when they want your vote and forget once they get your vote. Democracy, or I should say what I mean when I say democracy, is democracy as a living force, a moral force, a public force, a force that says governments may be powerful, but a government is not a god. Government may be necessary, but a government is not holy. Governments may have authority, but that authority is supposed to be accountable to the people. And when the government forgets that the people have the right to remind it. Now, one of the greatest examples of this in American history is the rise of direct democracy reforms during the Progressive era. And that sounds boring, I know. Direct democracy reforms, the Progressive era, sounds like something your high school history teacher said right before half of the classroom started to look out the window. But just stay with me here, because hidden inside of those dry textbooks, words, is a very human story. By the late 1800s and the early 1900s, a lot of ordinary Americans believed that their state governments had become captured by powerful interests. Railroads, political machines, party bosses, corporate money, and backroom deals. People looked around and said, wait a minute. These elected officials do not really seem afraid of us anymore. They seem afraid of railroad companies. They seem afraid of party bosses. They seem afraid of wealthy donors, but they do not seem afraid of the farmer, the worker, the mother, and the citizen. And once people realize that their representatives are no longer representing them, something changes. a holy impatience starts to rise, and so reformers begin pushing for tools like the initiative, the referendum, the recall. In plain English, they wanted citizens to have ways to bypass politicians when politicians refuse to act. The initiative allows citizens to put proposed laws or constitutional amendments on the ballot. The referendum allows citizens to approve or reject laws. The recall allows citizens in some places to remove officials before the next scheduled elections. Now, were these tools perfect? No. Nothing involving human beings will ever be perfect. I have been around church meetings, city politics, martial arts tournaments, and family reunions. Human beings can ruin a sandwich if enough ego gets involved. So no, direct democracy is not magic. But the principle matters. The people were saying, we are not helpless. We are not spectators. We are not just an audience watching politicians perform government on a stage. We are citizens. And if the official channels become blocked, we need another way to speak. That idea still matters today in 2026, just like it mattered in the 1800s and the 1900s. Because sometimes governments have to be corrected from below. Sometimes government has to be reminded by the people. Sometimes power has to be interrupted. And that brings us right back to the issue we talked about in the first segment, the gerrymandering and the redistricting. Because if ever there was an issue where politicians have built in a sort of conflict of interest, it's drawing their own districts. And let me say this plainly. Allowing politicians to draw their own districts is like letting a boxer pick his own referee, choose the side of the ring, decide when the bell rings, and then call it a fair fight. Come on now. At some point, common sense has to walk in the room wearing military gear. And in Michigan, the people eventually said enough. In 2018, Michigan voters approved Proposal 2, a constitutional amendment that created an independent citizen redistricting commission. The campaign was led by citizens through voters, not politicians. And the point was simple. Voters should choose politicians, not the other way around. This is not just a policy detail. This is a moral statement. It says representation should not be something politicians manage for their own survival. It says democracy should not be treated like a private property by whichever party happens to be in power. It says the maps belong to the people. Now again, no commission is perfect. There will always be arguments. There will always be court fights. There will always be people unhappy with results. But in 2018, Michigan shows us an important example because ordinary people use the democratic process to say the old way is not good enough. That is the people correcting the system. That is civic repair, not revolution, repair. And sometimes repair is more powerful than rage because rage burns hot and burns fast. Repair takes patience. Repair takes organizing. Repair takes signatures. Repair takes meetings. Repair takes volunteers standing outside grocery stores with clipboards while people pretend they do not see them. You know how we do. Somebody with a clipboard stands outside Walmart and suddenly everybody becomes an Olympic speed walker. But that is the kind of boring work that sometimes changes history. That is what we have to understand. Democracy is not only protected by dramatic speeches, it's protected by boring people doing boring things faithfully in perpetuity. And I do not mean boring as an insult. I mean boring is underrated. Everybody wants to be viral. Nobody wants to attend the zoning meeting. Everybody wants to yell online. Nobody wants to read the proposed amendment. Everybody wants to say, wake up. Nobody wants to wake up early enough to knock doors. But this is how people actually change things. Another example is in Florida. In 2018, it was Amendment 4. Florida voters approved of a constitutional amendment restoring voting rights to many people with felony convictions after they completed all terms of their sentence, excluding those convicted of murder or felony sexual offenses. It passed with over 64% of the people supporting it. Now, that issue is complicated for a lot of people. I know it is. Some people hear felony conviction and immediately shut down the conversation. But I want us to think about the principle. If a person has served their sentence, completed what the law required, returned to society, started working, paying taxes, raising children, rebuilding their life, then the question becomes, are they forever outside of the civic community? And if so, how can we call ourselves a Christian nation that believes in forgiveness and redemption? Are they permanently marked as people whose voice do not matter? And if their voice does not matter, then in what way should we be taking their money? And Florida voters across political lines said in that moment, no. They said restoration should mean something. Now, we could talk about what happened afterward. We could talk about implementation. We could talk about fines and fees. We could talk about how the political system sometimes resists the will of the people, even after the people speak. That's a whole nother segment. But the passage of Amendment 4 still matters because it shows something powerful. Ordinary voters can sometimes be more merciful than the political class. And let that sit for a second. Ordinary voters can sometimes be more generous than the people who claim to represent them. And maybe that should humble us, because we are often told that the public is too foolish, too emotional, too divided, too extreme to make serious decisions. And yes, the public can be all those things. Lord knows we can be. If you spend 10 minutes on Facebook, you may start questioning the enlightenment. But the public is also capable of moral clarity. The public is capable of compassion. The public is capable of saying the system has gone too far. And when enough people say that together, the government is forced to listen. Or at least the government has to reveal that it is refusing to listen. And that distinction matters, because sometimes the victory is not that power immediately changes. Sometimes the victory is that power gets exposed. Sometimes the victory is that the public record now says the people spoke. And if the government ignored them, that tells us something too. Ohio is another complicated example. Ohio voters approved a redistricting reform effort in 2015 and in 2018, trying to create more rules, more transparency, and more bipartisan checks around map making. The reforms were supposed to make it harder for one party to ram through self-serving maps without broader support. But Ohio also teaches us a harder lesson. Passing a reform is not the same as completing the reform. Sometimes the people vote for something and politicians still find ways to twist it, delay it, water it down, or obey the letter of the law while violating the spirit of the law. And that is important, because I do not want to sell people false hope. False hope is cheap. False hope says just vote once and everything will be fixed. No, that is not how power works. Power does not surrender because you passed one ballot measure. Power does not get saved at one revival service and suddenly becomes sanctified. Power backside. Power needs accountability. Power needs supervision. Power needs citizens who do not just show up once and then disappear. And this is why democracy requires memory. And people without memory can be tricked over and over and over and over again. And people without memory can also be sold the same line with a new slogan. And people without memory can watch politicians sabotage reform and forget it by the next election cycle. Memory is a civic virtue. We have to remember who said what. We have to remember who voted how. We have to remember who promised fairness when they were out of power and then defended manipulation once they got power. That is not partisan. That is citizenship. And this is where I want to bring the tone back to something reflective, because when people push back against the government, the goal should not be simply to humiliate the other side. The goal should be to restore the public good. And this is where I think we have lost our way. Too much of our politics is revenge dressed up as justice. Too much of our politics is retaliation dressed up as principle. Too much of our politics is they did this to us, so now we get to do this to them. But if we all do that, if all we do is copy the worst behavior of our opponents, we have not defeated the corruption. We have learned from it. That is a dangerous thing. The people have to demand better, not just from the other side, from us, from our side, from ourselves, from the system that we benefited from. And that's hard. It's easy to condemn an unfair map when it hurts your preferred outcome. It's hard to condemn an unfair map when it helps your preferred outcome. It's easy to believe voting rights when the voters agree with you. It's harder to believe in voting rights when those voters vote against you. It's easy to support reform when you are out of power. It's hard to support reform when it might limit your own power. But this is where principles live. Principles do not live where it is convenient. Principles live where it costs you something. And maybe that is the lesson of history in this moment. That people can correct the government, that people can reform and force reform, that people can use ballot initiatives, referendums, organizations, protests, lawsuits, public pressures, and local engagement to say, you got it wrong. But these people that do those things also have to correct themselves, because democracy is not just a system we inherit. It's a discipline we practice. It's a habit. It's a muscle. It's a culture. And a culture of democracy requires more than voting. It requires honesty. It requires patience. It requires humility. It requires the ability to lose without wanting to destroy the whole system. It requires the ability to win without trying to rig the next round. It requires citizens who believe that fairness matters, even when fairness does not immediately benefit them. That is the America we should be trying to build. Not an America where my side gets to cheat because your side cheated first. Not an America where every election becomes a holy war. And not in America where politicians carve the country into safe little kingdoms and then tell us this is representation. No, no, no. We need an America where people still have the moral courage to look at the government, even a government that led by people that they voted for, and say, no, you got this wrong. And this is not disloyal. This is democracy. This is not weakness. This is citizenship. This is not chaos. This is accountability. Because in a republic, the people are not supposed to be decorations. We are supposed to, we are not supposed to be props at a campaign rally. We are supposed to be the voice. We are not supposed to be a data point on a consultant's spreadsheet. We are not supposed to be managed, silenced, sorted, targeted, manipulated, and then ignored. We are the public. We are the reason the systems exist. And every government has to decide whether it will accept the system as it is or whether it will push the system closer to what it claims to be. And that is the work. Slow work, imperfect work, sometimes frustrating work. But holy work is what it's going to take. But holy work, if you ask me, is necessary. Because anywhere human dignity is defended, anywhere ordinary people insist that power must answer to truth, Anywhere the forgotten tell the powerful, you don't get to write us out of the story. Something sacred is happening. And maybe that is what the people need to hear in this second segment. Do not confuse exhaustion with defeat. Do not confuse corruption with inevitability. Do not confuse disappointment with destiny. The people have changed things before. The people can change things again, but only if the people remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. You cannot preserve a republic from the couch. You cannot reform a system that you refuse to understand. You cannot demand a better government while refusing the daily duties of citizenship. The people can still speak. The question is whether we are willing to do the slow, unglamorous, necessary work of making the government listen. Right back with more on the Jerome McClain Show.
There exists in the annals of American government a species of creature so perfectly adapted to its environment that one might almost admire the evolutionary cunning required to produce it. I speak, of course, of the courtier, that ancient and contemptible type who, lacking any discernible talent beyond the capacity for genuflection, rises through sheer force of sycophancy to positions for which they are laughably unqualified. Kashyap Patel, the current director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, represents perhaps the purest specimen of this genus ever to slither across the marble floors of Washington. Here is a man who has authored a trilogy of children's books in which he casts himself, and I must ask the reader to absorb this fully, as Cash the Distinguished Discoverer, a wizard who assists a noble monarch called King Donald in defeating such villains as Hillary Quinton and Komalalala. The FBI headquarters, in this fever dream of narcissistic fantasy, is reimagined as slug stables in a shadowy corner of the castle. One hardly knows whether to laugh or to weep at the psychopathology on display. That such a man now commands an agency of some 38,000 employees and wields a budget exceeding $10 billion is either a savage joke or evidence that the American experiment has finally succumbed to terminal absurdity. I incline toward the latter interpretation. The qualifications question deserves more than passing attention. Every previous FBI director in living memory has brought to the position extensive senior law enforcement experience. Patel's resume, by contrast, reads like the curriculum vitae of a man perpetually auditioning for a role he has not earned, a stint as a public defender in Miami, some years shuffling papers at the Department of Justice, a period as a congressional aide to Devin Nunes, a man whose primary contribution to public life has been to demonstrate that one can achieve high office while apparently suffering from a complete absence of intellectual curiosity. This is the background that supposedly prepares one to lead the nation's principal criminal investigation agency. One might as well appoint a carnival barker to perform neurosurgery on the grounds that both professions involve working with heads. That Patel was the primary architect of the notorious Nunes memo tells you everything you need to know about his relationship to truth. The man's entire career has been an exercise in the manufacture of convenient fictions. He has promoted the fantasy of Italygate, a conspiracy theory so preposterous that it would embarrass the more creative writers of airport thrillers. The claim that an Italian defense contractor conspired with the Central Intelligence Agency to alter the 2020 election results. He has appeared more than 50 times on podcasts affiliated with QAnon, that seething cauldron of American lunacy, which holds that the nation is secretly controlled by Satan-worshipping pedophiles who harvest chemicals from the blood of trafficked children. When confronted about inscribing copies of his children's books with WWWG1WGA, the movement's slogan, Patel offered the memorable defense that he disagrees with a lot of what that movement says, but agrees with a lot of what that movement says. This is not nuance. This is the verbal equivalent of a man attempting to exit a room through both the door and the window simultaneously. The sane Republican officials who encountered Patel during Trump's first administration understood immediately what they were dealing with. Attorney General William Barr, hardly a man given to excessive squeamishness, declared that Patel's appointment as Deputy FBI Director would happen over my dead body. CIA Director Gina Haspel threatened to resign rather than accept him. Defense Secretary Mark Esper has stated that Patel lied about whether Nigeria had approved a hostage rescue operation, thereby endangering American lives. General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, reportedly confronted White House officials about Patel with sufficient volume and persistence to alarm passers-by. These are not bleeding heart liberals. These are Trump's own appointees, and to a person they recognize the man as a danger. But danger, apparently, is precisely what was wanted. Patel has published what can only be described as an enemies list, 60 names, included as an appendix to his book Government Gangsters, of individuals he identifies as members of the executive branch deep state, a phrase he defines as the most dangerous threat to our democracy. The list includes former presidents, vice presidents, and a considerable number of people who committed the unforgivable crime of declining to participate in Trump's various conspiracies against the Republic. Patel has promised to come after these people. "We will go out and find the conspirators," he told Steve Bannon, "not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you, whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out." Note the admission of uncertainty about whether crimes have actually been committed. The investigation will proceed regardless. The legal theory can be developed later. This is the methodology of the show trial, the Star Chamber, the midnight knock on the door. And what has this crusader for justice been doing since assuming command of the FBI? The record is illuminating. He has used agency Gulfstream jets to attend concerts performed by his 27-year-old country singer girlfriend, Alexis Wilkins. He has assigned FBI SWAT personnel, elite tactical operators trained for the most dangerous operations in law enforcement, to serve as her personal security detail. On more than one occasion, he has ordered these specialists to drive her allegedly inebriated friends home after nights of revelry in Nashville. When the leader of the security detail objected to these duties, Patel called to berate him. The director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, commanding perhaps the most consequential law enforcement agency on Earth, has apparently confused his role with that of a nightclub promoter. The Brown University mass shooting of December 2025 provided a stark demonstration of Patel's operational competence, or rather, its complete absence. Within hours of the tragedy, Patel announced on social media that a person of interest had been detained. This person was released shortly thereafter, having apparently no connection whatsoever to the attack. It was a performance that echoed his handling of the Charlie Kirk assassination investigation months earlier, when he similarly rushed to social media with premature claims of an arrest. The FBI subsequently posted security camera footage that included the home addresses of the citizens whose cameras had captured the images, a blunder so elementary that one can only assume basic operational security has been abandoned as an institutional priority. When agents finally located the Brown shooter dead in a storage unit, it was difficult not to wonder whether the resolution had occurred despite, rather than because of, the FBI's leadership. The Charlie Kirk investigation revealed additional dimensions of Patel's character. According to reports, when he arrived in Salt Lake City to oversee the case, he refused to exit the FBI jet until agents located a medium-sized FBI raid jacket for him to wear before the cameras. The jacket had to be fitted with shoulder patches borrowed from a female agent. Meanwhile, agents who should have been pursuing leads were instead rummaging through storage closets to accommodate the director's vanity. Patel has denied this account, but the denial itself is instructive. The director of the FBI felt obligated to address, during a Fox News interview, allegations that he had delayed crime scene work for a wardrobe fitting. These are not the concerns of a serious law enforcement professional. These are the preoccupations of a reality television contestant. One might pause to consider the profound irony of a man who claims to be battling the deep state, while simultaneously directing its most powerful domestic investigative arm. The cognitive dissonance required to maintain this position would crush a lesser mind, but Patel has proven remarkably resilient in this regard. Having spent years promoting conspiracy theories about FBI corruption, he now demands that we trust him absolutely. Having called for the prosecution of journalists, he complains of unfair coverage. Having published a literal enemies list, he insists under oath before the Senate Judiciary Committee that no such list exists. "I do not have an enemies list," he told Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, apparently expecting no one to remember the appendix to his own book. The grift has been comprehensive. Patel founded the Cash Foundation, ostensibly to assist January 6th participants with their legal costs. He has sold wine branded with his name, the S replaced with a $sign, KTEDH, in case the symbolism might otherwise escape notice. He has hawked supplements that purport to detoxify the supposed negative effects of COVID vaccines, medical claims that exist in the same relationship to science as his political claims do to reality. The man has built an entire economy around the manufacture and monetization of grievance, and he has now been rewarded with control of one of the most powerful law enforcement agencies in the Western world. This is a wizard, certainly, but of the shabby variety one finds operating three-card Monte games on street corners. The internal reports are damning. FBI personnel have described Patel as insecure, prone to tantrums, and lacking the composure to withstand routine scrutiny. His composure erodes very quickly when confronted by critics, according to one assessment, a reflection of Director Patel's lack of self-confidence. This from the agency he purports to lead. Even Tucker Carlson, hardly a figure known for skepticism toward the MAGA project, has expressed his lack of confidence in Patel's leadership. "This dumb Twitter shit," Carlson observed, regarding the director's habit of making major investigative announcements via social media. Leaders of the FBI on Twitter, like what? One finds oneself in the unusual position of agreeing with Tucker Carlson, a circumstance that feels vaguely unsanitary, but is nonetheless unavoidable. Reports have surfaced that Trump himself has grown frustrated with the unflattering headlines Patel generates, that contingency plans for his replacement are circulating among administration officials, that Attorney General Pam Bondi has found his premature social media announcements to be threats to ongoing investigations. The man is on thin ice, apparently, though one suspects the ice in question is the thick polar variety that takes considerable effort to penetrate. Incompetence of this magnitude is almost always rewarded in the current dispensation. Nearly a quarter of FBI agents have reportedly been reassigned to immigration enforcement, work that does not fall within the Bureau's traditional purview, and which necessarily comes at the expense of counterterrorism, counterintelligence, and the investigation of violent crime. This is the transformation of a law enforcement agency into a political instrument, the subordination of public safety to ideological performance. And at the helm stands a man whose primary qualification appears to be his willingness to do whatever is asked of him, legal niceties be damned. Perhaps the most revealing episode of Patel's tenure involves his former ally Stephen Friend, a far-right FBI agent who had gained fame in MAGA circles for his own anti-establishment posturing. Patel fired friend after friend accused him of covering up aspects of a pipe bomb investigation. The movement is now devouring its own, the conspiracy theorist-in-chief finding himself accused of conspiracy by his fellow travelers. There is a certain grim comedy in watching a man who has made his career on paranoid accusations now being subjected to the same treatment. One might almost feel sympathy, if sympathy for such figures were not itself a form of moral negligence. What we are witnessing is the reduction of serious government to comic opera, except that the casualties are real and the damage is lasting. An agency tasked with protecting the nation from terrorism and investigating federal crimes is now led by a man who writes children's books about himself as a wizard, who courts the approval of people who believe in blood-drinking pedophile cabals, who uses government aircraft to attend his girlfriend's performances, and who cannot refrain from announcing investigative breakthroughs that prove, within hours, to be entirely false. The FBI deserves better. The country deserves better. The very concept of law enforcement deserves better. Kash Patel is not merely unqualified, he is the embodiment of a contempt for qualification itself, the personification of a political movement that has concluded expertise is just another form of elitism to be swept away. He is what you get when loyalty becomes the only metric and competence an afterthought. He is the natural consequence of deciding that owning the libs matters more than governing the country. And he is, one suspects, exactly what was intended all along. Not a director of the FBI, but a destroyer of it, appointed to hollow out an institution from within while wearing its uniform and claiming its authority. The wizard, it turns out, has no magic at all, only a willingness to perform whatever trick his master demands. The children's book, in retrospect, was not fantasy, but prophecy, a simple tale for simple minds, in which the virtuous king triumphs over his enemies through the efforts of a faithful servant who asks no questions and does exactly as he is told. That this servant is now the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation is the punchline to a joke that stopped being funny some considerable time ago.
Patel's days. I think Cash Patel's days are numbered, but as we come towards the close of this show, I want to land the plane gently and not crash, and no emergency landing. Just a sober, honest reminder, because today I talked about maps, districts, gerrymandering, and ballot initiatives, politicians, parties, power, and of course, Cash Patel. But underneath all of that, what are we really talking about is something deeper, and we'll just say it's trust. Trust is one of those things that's easy to destroy, but hard to build. That is a true in marriage. It's true in friendship. It's true in business. It's true in church. It's true in families. And it's true in government. Trust is a slow building being made. It's the architecture that you have to build brick by brick by brick. But one reckless swing of a hammer can bring the whole thing down. And right now, America, we do have a trust problem. Not just a political problem, a trust problem. People don't trust Congress. They don't trust parties. They don't trust the media. They don't trust courts. They don't trust elections. And increasingly, they don't trust each other. And when society loses trust, every disagreement becomes a conspiracy. Every mistake becomes proof of evil. Every loss becomes theft. Every compromise becomes betrayal. Every opponent becomes an enemy. And that is no way to live. There's no way to govern. There's no way to raise a family. There's no way to raise children. There's no way to preserve a republic. And this is why this issue matters. Not because maps are exciting to me or anybody else. I'm fairly certain most people don't wake up in the morning excited about congressional boundary lines. I don't think a lot of people are sitting at breakfast. I dare say nobody is sitting at breakfast saying, please pass the eggs. I need to study the precinct level demographic data as well. At least I hope that's not how breakfast conversations are going. And if they are, well, God bless you. You are one spreadsheet away from sainthood. But maps matter only because people need to believe that the representation that they hire to represent them is real. People need to believe their vote is not just a ritual. The people need to believe elections are not performances with predetermined outcomes. We need to believe that our voice still matters when we enter the room. Because when people stop believing that, the danger is not just anger. The danger is withdrawal. People stop paying attention. They eventually stop voting. They stop planning. They stop strategizing. They stop organizing. They stop hoping. And once people surrender their hope, the powerful do not have to silence anyone. The people have silenced themselves. And this is what we cannot afford. We cannot afford a nation of people who have given up. We can't afford citizens who become spectators. We cannot afford people we can't become people who afford people of faith, but inside they have deep despair and deep non-discernment. Let me say that again. We cannot afford people of faith who secretly confuse despair with discernment. Some people think being constantly negative, cynical, whatever you want to call it, means they are wise. I have to challenge that. Sometimes it means they're exhausted, tired, wounded. Sometimes it means that they have mistaken their bitterness for prophecy. Well, the prophetic tradition does not merely announce judgment. It calls us back to faithfulness over and over again. The prophets did not stand up and say everything is terrible. They said return. Return to justice. Return to mercy. Return to truth. Return to your covenants. Return to the God who judges nations not only by the songs they sing and the slogans they say, but how we treat the vulnerable, the poor, the stranger, the widow, the orphan, the prisoner, and the neighbor. So when I talk about democracy, republics, parliamentary systems, I'm not worshiping government systems. I'm not confusing America with the kingdom of a God. I'm not putting my ultimate hope in Congress, courts, parties, candidates, constitutions, or people. My hope has to be deeper than politics, because my hope is deeper than politics. And because of this, I do not have to be careless about politics, because my citizenship is not here. It's somewhere else in heaven. And I can be responsible with my citizenship on earth, but I have no hope that it's the final solution. That is the balance that I have to wrestle with most of the time. I do not worship the state, but I also do not abandon my neighbors who are in the state. And I don't abandon my neighbors to the state. I do not idealize democracies, but we do not shrug when democracy is manipulated. We do not pretend voting can save the human soul, but we also do not pretend elections have no consequences for actual people in the world right now. Policies touch people. So maps touch people. Representation touches people. And if you care about people, you have to care about the systems that shape their lives. Now, here's where it's going to get practical. It is easy to say the system is broken. It is hard to ask, what is my responsibility? And I think responsibility begins close to home. Know who represents you, not just the president, not just the senator whose name you heard on cable TV. Know your city council person. Know your school board representatives. Know your state delegates, your state senators. Know your time when they're going to draw up the lines. Know who votes on the rules. Know who sits in the boring meetings I talked about earlier, where discussions get made before the public even realizes the decision was on the table. Because power often hides in boardrooms. This is one of the oldest tricks in politics. Make the process so technical, so dry, so procedural, so exhausting, so bureaucratic that ordinary people don't want to deal with it and they walk away. Then once the ordinary people walk away, the insiders run the table. And this is why citizens have to become harder to bore. And I know that sounds funny, but I mean it. A healthy republic requires citizens who are harder to bore. Citizens who can sit through the meeting. Citizens who can read the proposal. Citizens who can ask second and third questions. Citizens who can say, wait a damn minute, what does that actually mean? Because slogans are cheap. Everybody has a slogan. Defend democracy, protect freedom, restore fairness, save America, make America great again, justice, no peace, blah, 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 blah. Fine. But show me the policy. Show me the map. Show me the language. Show me who benefits. Show me who gets silenced. Show me who gains power. Show me who loses representation. That is a mature citizenship. And a mature citizenship is what we need. Not more outrage, not more political theater, not more demagogues, not more people screaming online for applause. We need people with enough moral seriousness to say, I want my side to win, but I do not want my side to corrupt the entire process in order to do so. That's the sentence right there that would heal a lot of what America is going through right now. But only if enough American people mean it. I want my side to win, but I do not want my side to corrupt the process to do it. Because victory without integrity eventually becomes defeat for everybody. You may win the election. You may win the map. You may win a court case. You may win the news cycle of the day. But if you destroy public trust by doing it, what exactly did you win? A house with no foundation, a crown with no kingdom, a system people obey but no longer believe. That is not healthy. And I need both parties to hear this. Republicans need to hear it. Democrats need to hear it. Independents need to hear it. Progressives need to hear it. The Green Party people need to hear it. Conservatives need to hear it. Anarchists like myself need to hear it. The political homeless need to hear it. If you only care about fairness when unfairness hurts you, you don't give a damn about fairness. You care about your advantage. You only care about democracy when democracy gives you power. But you don't care about it when it's taking power from everybody else. You care about winning. And listen, I like winning. I'm a competitor. I wrestled, played baseball, did jiu-jitsu, ran cross country, I did gymnastics. I understand wanting to win. But real competitors know there's a difference between winning a match and poisoning the tournament. There's a difference between strategy and corruption. There's a difference between playing hard and changing the rules so nobody else gets a fair shot. And I'm afraid too much of American politics have become people poisoning the tournament and then bragging about winning the match. And that cannot continue forever. At some point, somebody has to say, no, 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 this is not sustainable. And when that happens, that somebody cannot only be politicians. It has to be you. It has to be me. It has to be us, the people, the public, the citizens, the neighbors, the parents, the pastors, the veterans, the bankers, the teachers, the workers, the engineers, the students, the people who still have to live together after campaign ads stop running. because that is another thing we forget. Politicians fight on television, and then they may go have dinner together. Meanwhile, ordinary people stop talking to each other, stop talking to relatives, start hating each other. Church members fall out. Neighbors look at each other sideways. Families fracture. Friendships die. And for what? For what? For people in power who benefit from keeping you angry? No. We have to be wiser than this. We have to be more principled without being gullible, passionate without being hateful, engaged without being consumed, hopeful without being naive. That is a narrow road. And I'll admit, it's very hard. But grown-up citizenship is hard. Faithfulness is hard. Legacies are hard. Democracies are hard. Anything worth preserving in life is going to be hard. A marriage is hard. A business is hard. A church is hard. A family is hard. A republic is hard. The question is not whether it's hard. The question is whether we still believe it's worth the work. And I do. Even with all the corruption, even with all the hypocrisy, even with all the lying, even with all the maps, even with all the money, even with all the tribalism, even with all the cable news circus and social media madness and political talking points and the professional wrestling stuff with law degrees, I still believe the work is worth doing. Not because America is perfect. I don't know of any place that has ever been perfect. And it's not because of our institutions. I don't know of any institutions that are pure. They're not, and they're never going to be. And it's not because the people are always wise. We're not. But the alternative to civic responsibility is civic decay. And decay does not need your permission. Decay happens when people stop tending the farm. Decay happens when people say someone else will fix it. Decay happens when honest people get tired and dishonest people get organized. And that line that I'm going to end on right here is what I want you to remember if you don't remember anything else I said. Decay is what happens when honest people get tired while dishonest people get organized. So do not get tired in the permanent sense. Get some rest. You have to do it. Step back when you need to. Turn the damn TV off. Turn the noise off. Pray, walk, read, drink, smoke, have sex, run. Do whatever you got to do. Spend time with people you love. Touch some grass. But do not surrender. Do not surrender your mind to propaganda. Do not surrender your conscience to party loyalty. Do not surrender your neighbor to ideology. Do not surrender your country to cynicism. Do not surrender your vote to the belief that it does not matter, because power loves nothing more than a discouraged citizen. A discouraged citizen is easy to manage. A discouraged citizen stays at home. A discouraged citizen complains but never organizes. A discouraged citizen becomes predictable and manipulatable. But a hopeful citizen, a disciplined citizen, a citizen who reads, who votes, who questions, organizes, remembers, forgives, resists, and keeps showing up, that's the kind of citizen that is dangerous in the best way possible. That's the kind of citizen that republics are built by and republics are repaired by. So, my closing word today is simple. Do not let them make you hopeless. Do not let corruption convince you that corruption is normal. Do not let hypocrisy of a political party steal your commitment to principles that you know are correct. Do not let bad maps make you forget you are a good citizen. Do not let powerful people convince you that ordinary people are powerless, because history says otherwise. That people have spoken before, that people have corrected government before, that people have forced reform before, and that people will do it again. But only if we stop treating this republic like a show we watch and start treating it like a responsibility we must carry. Republics do not only die inch by inch. Sometimes, by grace and courage, they are repaired inch by inch. One honest conversation at a time, one fair map at a time, one local meeting, one ballot initiative, one act of courage. One person deciding, I will not give up my responsibility just because the powerful gave up their shame. That's enough for today. And as always, this is the Darrell McLean Show, where I try to tell you the truth without losing your soul. I try my best to love you guys, to teach you how to love your neighbors without surrendering your mind. And we are trying to remember that the work of justice is long, but the work is still needed. The work is still holy. So, stay woke, stay grounded, stay principled, and don't let anybody convince you that your voice does not matter, especially politicians. Because if politicians are trying this hard to choose their voters, that means that they already know votes still have power. And that, my friends, is precisely why you can't stop using it. See you on the next episode.
Don't let go, don't let go. Even when I'm losing control, don't let go, don't let go. Even when my faith gets low, when I'm drifting from your soul, don't let go. Don't let go, don't let go. Even when I lose my hope, when I'm hanging by a rope, don't let go, 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 go. I've been on the edge, I've been in my head, fighting every thought that I never said, trying to hold on but my grip too weak. Every time I fall, you still reach for me. I was running, you were chasing. I was breaking, you were saving. Now I'm calling out your name and don't let go, even when my faith gets low, when I'm drifting from your soul. Don't let go, don't let go, even when I lose my hope, when I'm hanging by a rope. Don't let go, 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 go. Don't let go. Need you close. Try to do it all on my own. Now I see I was never alone. Every road that I took was wrong, but you turned it into a song. If I fall again tonight, promise me you hold me tight. Even when I lose the fight, be my light, be my light. Don't let go, don't let go. Even when my faith gets low, when I'm drifting from your soul. Don't let go, don't let go. Even when I lose my hope, when I'm hanging by your rope, don't let go.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Of course, if you want to support the show, you can do so by going to www.patreon.com and getting a membership for as little as $3 a month. Again, that's www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show. The Jerome McClain Show is fully listener-supported, independent media that won't lead you to tribalism. Get a membership and support independent media at www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show.